Have a good show. Hello, good evening, everyone. Don't know if you heard that. Just telling my
Welcome.
fearless companion here
Welcome,
to
foolish
have a good
mortals.
show, and I'm sure it will be. Welcome, everyone, to Into and Out of the Rums, special edition with my valued colleague Craig Ansel, Sinister Mysteries #7. Good stuff. So listen, we are just we're excited to get into this. This is there are only certain parts, Craig, of this that are sinister.
Yeah. There's not real. That's not real. That's why it's when I think it was a few shows ago. I said it's like not all of these are going to seem on face value like sinister,
Right.
but there's going to be some components of it that are going to fit into there. So it's still going to be kind of things, but it's you got to give a little leeway on this ones because I mean there's only just so many things that people are going to want to see the same thing covered multiple hundreds of times. But it's like this one's a cool one.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I was not skeptical, but as I started my research, I was going, I don't know about this one. So when we come back after I roll the opening, I'm going to want to ask like when you first heard about it and what hooked you into it. Because not too far into my research, I got very deeply hooked into this thing. And of course, the most sinister aspects of it. I want to take the opportunity to tell the audience now that we got plenty of Sinister coming up because in February we have 2 shows. We have first and third weeks in each month. We're going to do this. And we have Sinister Ministries. So I think like Nexium, Heaven's Gate, so on and so forth. David Koresh. Hopefully Jim Jones will touch on. That's Sinister.
Oh yeah. Well, and for anybody inside baseball, the reason we are doing that is because of me. Because I keep having these episodes where I'm trying to say the name of our show and it's supposed to be Sinister Mysteries, but every time I'm just talking with Joey, I'll say, it's like, I can't wait for this next episode of Sinister Ministries. And I'm like, I did it again. And so finally we just told him, it's like, let's do a show on this. I mean, because apparently I want to.
And it's going to be wild. I mean, that stuff is fascinating and very sinister, from Nexium with the marks on the legs to the whole bit. So, and then we're going to follow that up with Rasputin, who is the most sinister ministry of all, perhaps. Very interesting dude. And then we're going to come back in March with Operation Condor and Air America, or the other way around. I forget which one is first. So anyway, let's roll the opening and come back. Hello, everyone. I'll check out the comments while we're rolling the opening. Here we go.
There exists a realm beyond our wildest dreams, a realm beyond reality that the gatekeepers and guardians have always told us consists of nothing but tricks of the eye, weather balloons, swamp gas, sand cranes, fairy tale myths of monsters, crackpot conspiracy theories, and desperate cries for attention.
We know this realm exists, and it's just beyond the horizon. The preset path, the well-worn walkways where the cynics want us to stay.
Instead, give this a listen. Put on your headphones, adjust your volume, close your eyes, and fasten your mental seatbelts, because the twilight-tinged turnoff from reality's alluring highway is looming just ahead.
We're about to leave the plane of the easily explained, couldn't possibly be's, and the no way I just saw what I saw's, for the spaces and places where everything is possible, and if you stay long enough, even probable. We're about to take a journey into the outer realms.
All right. Oh, look. He's leaning in to see what's what. So tell me, my friend, when did you first find out about the Toynbee tiles?
We're going to plug another show. It's called the Sofa King Podcast. That's when I'd first heard of this one, and those guys over there. They had covered this one, and since then I'd taken a notice. But it's one of those things I'd never heard of before this thing, and it's a real subtle thing because and it's fairly recent. It's I would almost, it's like a precursor to Banksy is really how this works. Is what this is a lot, because this is, as we get into this is a graffiti style, but like Banksy, it's not destructive. It's actually something that, where you have it, and it's become where you have some cities are protecting these now. They're actually taking steps to preserve these because they've just become iconic, just like the Banksy thing. Those things get protected once they happen. Unlike your typical like gang sprawl, on a wall with spray paint. These ones are actually, and we'll get into all that. But yeah, that was, so early '80s is when this started, and so it's pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty cool how the thoughts on how this went down.
Right. And the more you dig, and we're going to talk about a documentary tonight that everybody should watch, and it won a bunch of awards. I believe it was Sundance. The director got an award at Sundance for it. It's quite good. It's 90 minutes. It's called Resurrect Dead. We'll share some stuff with you tonight. So the tiles themselves, because what I love about it is, yes, it is visual art, but it's also connected to ham radio and Texas antenna and newsletters and a mysterious association that's probably one dude stuck in his house. The suspects are interesting. The source material is interesting. So let's get into it. We have 11 slides for you tonight, which we'll call upon now and again. But here, oh no, I thought I had them reset. Sorry. So here's the very, very first one. And Craig, right, this was in Philadelphia in '83.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's it's really cool because they're linoleum, and they're about the size of a license plate.
Yep.
And so they're not like these giant things. So most people, like when you're driving down the street, you probably wouldn't even notice it if you weren't really paying attention, because the image, like behind the image, you're seeing like the one in the background you have, that is a crosswalk bar. Mm-hmm. And so this would actually be pretty much like an almost a great representative to the size it would be. So if you're driving by a crosswalk, that's how that would look. And so it's pretty cool. I
mean, there have been bigger ones. There's been copycats, and we'll talk about those. But yeah, they're about 12 inches by 6 inches. Mm-hmm. The main panels, and as you can see, there are top and bottom panels there. Typically, the bottom panels or a nearby panel would tell people how they can do this, and we'll get into that. And also, they have some kind of sayings that kind of brings the sinister into all of this, having to do with the media and all. But the original one, and so this one was at Franklin Square in Philly. So even though there have been hundreds of these, most of them show up in Philadelphia, which researchers take as a clue that that's where the original Tyler came.
Yeah, but that's where they think he came from, resides, and stuff. So that's
right. So if we break this down real quick, Toynbee idea. Now notice the A. The A is very distinctive. It looks either like a little hut or it looks like a rocket ship, depending. That one's kind of flattened out. Some of them are more pointy, like in this one right here. But anyway, Toynbee idea, and we're going to get real quickly into who was Toynbee and what was the idea. In movie 2001, you'll notice that the I is small. It's also small in Jupiter. So this is the master, so to speak, where we can tell who was a genuine copycat, who are the originals, and where did people deviate? Because public art is meant to be riffed upon. Wouldn't you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You take the idea and then you carry it forward. Plus, the original Tyler was saying, "Hey, this is how you do it," even though I'm just one person here alone fighting.
I kind of took it in. I don't want to jump in too much on here. I kind of took it like back. If you remember back in the 80s, it was really big to hand out those missionary tracts.
Yes.
Those little pamphlets. You go, I guess it's like here, Jesus, everybody, you see people all over the place, just groups handing out these different ones telling you, are you going to go to heaven or are you going to go to hell? Well, these ones, to me, this was kind of almost like a stick and paste, tract where this is, telling a message. I have a message to tell. Here's this. And then it was telling you to, some of these ones were telling you to spread the word, and this is how to spread the word. And so it was almost like it was, instead of just standing on the street corner with the bell, the end is coming, this is basically figured out a way to stick these things on the asphalt and, move on, and nobody knows who it was.
Right. And I'm glad that you brought up about the flyers or the pamphlets, because what they call in the documentary wheat paste flyers, apparently those were being handed out at times, but they're real hard to come by. People say, yeah, this dude gave them to me, but then they go, I don't remember. And nobody seems to, to have copies of them. So this was multi-dimensional. All we think, going down to one man who we'll talk about. So they're first photographed in the late 80s, which is interesting because nobody's even making a record of these things until, say, 6 to 7 years after they start to be talked about and all. And the first known media reference was until 1994, and that was in the Baltimore Sun, which is also interesting. As far as the actual tiles, because the guy behind them and the idea, that goes back much earlier. So Toynbee's idea in movie 2001, you want to take the last two lines and kind of explain those?
The resurrect dead on planet Jupiter.
Yeah.
This one's kind of a deep dive. Basically, if I give it just like a real quick summary, the theory is that all of us, if you take you and me, we die. We're all made up of the same atoms. There's no matter what. The theory is that if you were to contain me into a container and just break me into the, all the different atoms that I'm made of, well, you could reassemble all those and you're going to be able to make me again, over and over and over. So what they think, like this person was talking about, was taking this essence of everyone, all these dead people, so all the people that have died, and taking them over to Jupiter and basically reassembling them and resurrecting the dead, because you'd have all the material you would need to create these people again. And that's where this idea, you kind of lose a thing. It's like, okay, the person's already gone, so it really technically wouldn't be the person again, because you're grabbing a different oxygen you're grabbing a different, but that is the real abridged, Cliff Notes, version of what that is.
Well done. So there was this guy named Arnold J. Toynbee, and he was a philosopher / historian. There's 4 different ideas. 2 of them are not talked about in the documentary at all. So Craig, I don't even know if you know about these, but there are 4 ideas of the source material. And it all starts with Toynbee, this historian philosopher. He wrote a 12-volume set about the history of the world, very deep thinker. But in his book, Experiences, he says this, and I'm going to read it at length here. Human nature presents human minds with a puzzle, which they have not yet solved and may never succeed in solving, for all that we can tell. The dichotomy of a human being into soul and body is not a datum of experience. No one has ever been or ever met a living human soul without a body. Well, we can, knowing some psychic mediums in our lives, we can dispute that. But from Toynbee's we've never met a living soul without a body. Someone who accepts, as I myself do, taking it on trust, the present-day scientific account of the universe may find it impossible to believe that a living creature once dead can come to life again. But if he did entertain this belief, so you see the philosophical sort of circle speak, and if he did entertain this belief, he would be thinking more scientifically if he thought in the Christian terms of a psychosomatic resurrection than if he thought in the shamanistic terms of a disembodied spirit. So he seems to be saying, Toynbee, that reincarnation or reconstitution in a physical body is much more likely than ghosts and spirits, which is interesting.
Yes. Yeah, that's kind of like what I said. Mine was a short abridged version. Yeah. How it came in. that's one of the cool things, because it's about it, because it's more than just some random thought process. So it looks like somebody actually, I mean, but in a way, don't most people that come up with, crazy things like their manifestos and stuff, they have it rooted in some something that's been written before, something that they've studied, and it's almost becomes an obsession in a way to it just other thing. And it's just, and that's kind of, we're going to build on. And I mean, I really do think that was a really good basis behind this thing, like what he really, he was going on. I mean, we'll get into, what the Marvel that was filmed in 1968.
Yeah. Yes, we will. What was I going to say? A good example of that, taking a source material and creating your manifesto and going forward from it, and inevitably somewhat corrupting it, which this guy isn't really doing. Why Kubrick's film and this idea? Well, remember at the end of 2001, the Dave dies in this sort of very sort of sterile room. But then the big music comes in, the theme song, the big timpani drums, and there's the baby in the circle.
Mm-hmm.
As if Dave's come to the end of his life, but somehow at Jupiter, you can come back to life. Now, Ray Bradbury, and I'm reading Something Wicked This Way Comes right now, so a little synchronicity there. Ray Bradbury, absolutely brilliant. He had a short story called The Toynbee Convector,
mm-hmm.
which alluded to Toynbee's idea that to survive, humankind must always rush to meet the future and believe in a better world, must always aim far beyond what is practically possible in order to achieve something barely within reach. And that message might be that humanity should strive to colonize Jupiter, as in Clarke's work, or something greater to survive. This reminds me, not that I'm a huge fan of his, but I will go to his work now and again. Joe Rogan talks about that a lot. Mm-hmm. Humanity creates, builds, invents, improves upon. It's like a compulsion for humans. And Ray Bradbury being that kind of guy. So that's interesting. I don't see that in the Toynbee Tiles or the Toynbee Tile messages, Craig. I don't see this urgency of technological development. Do you?
No, not really. I don't think it ever, it's, to me, it speaks more like when, as anybody goes out there and you guys do research and look up some of these images, you'll see at time they're more of, it's like a call to, I don't want to say call to action. It's more of just like, this is it. I keep going back to that same thing. It's like the guy in the street corner. The world's coming to an end, type thing. This is like their doomsday scenario. We've got to prepare. We're going to have to resurrect our dead on planet Jupiter.
Right.
Type thing. And the movie 2001's idea is the way that this is going to occur.
Right. And then did you know about this one? Arthur C. Clarke, who wrote 2001, had a short story called Jupiter 5. And in it, there's a spaceship called the Arnold Toynbee, and it's on a mission to Jupiter, and it has some overlap with 2001.
Yeah, I didn't know about that. Until, so yeah, that's that one kind of, you could see where there's some definite overlaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, where you could go, yeah, I could see where this guy could really be getting, these things. So it's like this Arnold Toynbee thing is not that weird of a name when you start seeing that all these things. I mean, I'm curious though too. It's just why Toynbee was used in these things, because it just seems like such an obscure name, even for a science fiction.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
I never saw a connection between that and the actual historian type thing, like why they would, pick that name for a ship.
Well, I think that Arthur C. Clarke was probably inspired to a certain extent, and Toynbee never talks about that this has to take place on Jupiter. That's why it's interesting, right? Toynbee writes this idea. He inspires Ray Bradbury, who puts the Toynbee Convector in his thing, right? He's got this 12-volume history of the world steeped in philosophy, so it's going to juice a lot of ideas. So Ray Bradbury gets turned on, Arthur C. Clarke gets turned on. We're going to go to our fourth one in just a second.
Mhm.
someone that I happen to know a lot about. And all of a sudden, the story is that the Tyler, by accident in 1979, stumbled upon Toynbee's work. And it lit some kind of interesting fire in him
Mhm.
that manifested not as a short story, um, in either case, Bradbury or Clarke, or the larger work, 2001, but it manifested as these street tiles. So the fourth one, there was a play that was performed in 1983. It was a one-act play, and it was by David Mamet. David Mamet wrote American Buffalo. He wrote Glengarry Glen Ross. He's written films like Wag the Dog. He's a brilliant guy. He's founded acting schools. I've been very immersed in Mamet's work. He can also be a very egotistical and very difficult man, especially now in his old age. He can kind of be bitter, accusatory, all these kinds of things. He believes that the Toynbee tiles are actually an homage to his play 4 a.m. Now, what is 4 a.m. about? It's about a radio host based on Larry King, and David Mamet will admit, I used to listen to Larry King's radio show at 4 in the morning
Mhm.
all the time, and this is an homage. He'll go that far. So a caller calls Larry King in this play, or the unnamed radio host based on Larry, and he says that the movie 2001, based on the writings of Toynbee, is a plan to reconstitute life on Jupiter. The host points out in a Larry King sort of way that the factual errors in a caller's assertion and the logical fallacies of his plan. That's the end of it. But in this documentary that you and I watched, they the researchers say that Mamet's play, there was an incident that predates it by 3 years.
Yeah,
February
Mamet used,
1980, right? A
Mhm.
caller actually calls Larry King's radio show, right?
Mhm.
And then an article in 1983 in the Philadelphia Inquirer mentions a local man contacting talk shows and newspapers to spread the message about bringing the dead to life on Jupiter. There is audio that you'll hear in Resurrecting the Dead, and anybody who takes big pieces of that documentary and uses it to create their own video, where Mamet says, I don't get my ideas from anywhere. I make them up. There was no real caller. What's
And
your
then
response to that in the context of all this?
in that one, I said, I think you're for all better purposes. I know I says there's the P word comes out, plagiarism.
Oh yeah,
It's because it's one of those. It's could it have been an original thought? Yes. Could it have been? But because we're talking the time, this is predates internet. This predates a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
So, you would have to physically know somebody, listen to it, do something like this, to get these things, to hear about it. It wasn't, I couldn't just call you, back in the 80s, you don't just call somebody up. It's like, hey, look this up. You can't do that. You'd have to listen to it live, or somebody'd have to bring you a cassette. Right. So it'd be hard to prove that he did, but it's just one of those, the circumstantial evidence is there that this is a plagiarism, that this was plagiarized.
Yeah.
Purely, like he took somebody else's stuff, claimed it as his own, and pawning it off as this is his original idea. But could you concretely prove that? No, because no. I mean, there's enough of a variation to where you can say, he might be right, but it's the same thing. When you both are describing a different kind of car driving down a dark, starry road, and it turns left and it ends up hitting a tree. Well, mine was a red car. Yeah, but the car was black. It's the same story.
Yeah. And it's really difficult, as a playwright, as a screenwriter, as a novelist, I will say, and one of the essays that I've written on the art and craft of writing is there's a fine line between homage and plagiarism. Mm-hmm. If anybody remembers the True Detective that was on HBO, the first season, the source material about nihilism is a brilliant show with Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. The first season, I passed on the second season. But the writer got into a lot of trouble because he plagiarized this theoretical work about nihilism. I think with Mamet, and it happens to me, you think your idea is original, but then suddenly you'll go back and you'll realize, oh crap, that's something that I heard. That's something that I watched in a movie and my mind morphed and it put out in the world packaged. And copyright is always about how much have you changed the thing. So being that Larry King is a real person and there was a real call from a real caller, that would be tough in court if you would say that was plagiarism. But I think that Mamet got very crafty and just didn't want to deal with it. And so he said, oh, you know,
Yeah.
It was my own idea. And knowing Mamet and how crotchety he can be. So, so Tanya says, I know you put out, Craig, does anyone have any thought on the tiles meaning? Tanya said, a thought just popped into my head. Could it be a cipher? What do you think?
I mean, it could be. I mean, I said that's the like, you know, I recommend the documentary. It's it's actually one of those things. It's really weird. You know, this is one of the first ones where you've seen a documentary where I've actually felt like, you know, yeah, everybody actually should watch this. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised. It's free on YouTube. You can search it up on YouTube.
Yep.
Literally, Resurrect Dead is what is the name of it. Type that up, and you're gonna you'll be there. It is right there. And you can watch it. I think it's about an hour and a half, and 40 minutes, something like that. Yeah,
exactly 90 minutes. Yeah,
yeah, and it's really good. I mean, I said he actually did a really good job. I mean, you'll see one thing. I mean, they even get to the point where they think they figured out who it might be, and they're even at the door knocking, trying to figure it. And you know, maybe it is one of those things like let's see how the best way to phrase this. You know how some of those groups do the puzzle games?
Yeah.
Where they'll leave clues and you follow it if you can solve this clue. So Tanya might be right. I mean, that may have been his thing. If you could figure out if it was a puzzle, you figure out what that is, well, then it would take you to where you need to go to the other one. So some of these things, they could have been clues leading to something. You know, if you show up on his door, you do something like that, all of a sudden you're a disciple. So who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe if he had done the right steps, you know, the door would have been answered instead of just knocking and nobody answering.
Right. And Lori says it's an awareness. I think the guy was very committed. So I have to preface that a lot of, at least from my end, what we're going to talk about probably in the next 20, 25 minutes or so, it is very much from this Resurrect the Dead. There's no way around it because there were really these three guys who cared enough to really deep dive into all of this. And it became an obsession for this guy, Justin Dewar, who's an artist, and is a very interesting guy. It's worth watching. But 2011, filmmaker John Foy won the U.S. documentary category at no less than Sundance Film Festival in the directing award. And it kind of predates, if you watch a lot of documentaries on Netflix now, they're so flashy and visually interesting. And this guy sort of anticipated all of that 12 years ago. You know, with the writing on the pad, Craig, and things like that. Yeah, so this guy was definitely ahead of his time. So you want to talk about suspects?
Yeah, we could. And real quick, address Lori saying. Some of the groups, they do that intentionally because they want to weed out the undeserving.
Yeah.
And so the message, there are some, I'm apologize, I'm recovering from a head cold, so it's like my brain's all fuzzy. There's a few groups that are well known, and one of the subjects I even tossed to Joey is what we might cover at some point. There's these groups where it's a rite of passage that you have to be able to solve this. CIA's done it. They've done these things where there are different puzzles. They're so obscure and so hard, and it's meant to be. They don't want just anybody solving it and showing up. You don't want just some random Bob showing up like, I figured it out. No, you want the guy. You want whoever the individual is to be worthy of that spot. And if they can pass all these trials and all these tests, then they've already met the intellectual part. And that's why it must. And that's one of those things. But you just like it may not even be anything. It may not be a puzzle. It just may be simply a crazy man, and he thinks that you're going to resurrect the dead on planet Jupiter according to the official Bible, 2001. Right. You know, that's the thing. I mean, it could be Could be something, could be
Yeah.
nothing. We don't know. All we know is it's stuck on asphalt. And that sounded dirty.
Yeah, no, and yeah, that's a little precursor for the latest manifestations of it. Lori says, "Ha, it must be undeserving, ha." But I think if it's not for you, it's not for you. That's my feeling. If it doesn't resonate with you, if you're not interested in it, think about these things are in Kansas City. They're in St. Louis. They're in 3 cities in South America. They're all over the place. People walk over the top of these and drive over the top of these all the time. Boston, Richmond, outside the Holland Tunnel in New York, in Times Square. Anybody who's been in Times Square knows that the traffic is crazy in Times Square. And yet there were only 3 researchers who cared enough. If you go out onto the internet, Craig, there's not like there's dozens of these shows about Toynbee tiles.
No,
it's
they're not.
very niche. It's very niche.
Yeah, I think the official number is somewhere right around 300 that they think are authentic Toynbee tiles. And then there's more, but we'll get into that, as the other groups and other people that have done these things and have added and done these things. But they think, based off of the image that Joey has up on the screen right now, that style, that red lettering, the white background, the blue border, that style of thing, that they think there's maybe about 300 original.
Yeah. So Tanya and Lori are ready to go down the rabbit hole. I really don't think this is any kind of cipher. There's no repeating. Tanya's going to ask her dad, who was in the NSA. My dad was a cryptographer as well. It's one of the interesting things we share together. There's no real repetitions of things. Sometimes the I's are capitalized, sometimes they're not. And as you'll see, he riffs on and changes them. And that's where it starts to get real interesting. I suppose we could go into this next, Craig.
It's really hard to go in any real order.
No, it's kind of, I know. So as we go, so as you can see, he now expands on it. This one says, now Galileo's cult of the Hellion is now searching for super hell beyond hell. As Toynbee says, and then it's broken up.
More than one hell to get more reward.
To get more reward. It gets very dark. What is this whole thing about the Hellion thing? Where he doesn't stop here, and maybe this will shine a bigger light on it. This is his manifesto.
The manifesto.
Also found in Philadelphia. And this was the thing that really lit me up when I saw this. So you will see up in the right-hand corner, regular Toynbee idea in movie 2001, Resurrect Dead on planet Jupiter. So it's a little different. He's added on. He's changed it a little. That also maybe tells us that maybe it isn't any kind of cipher. A cipher should stay the same in order to solve the key. But he is using the distinctive smaller I in movie, and he's using the smaller I in Jupiter. I'm guessing, Craig, he did those certain things and did his A's in that weird sort of way. So while he was encouraging people to carry on the work and spread it, he wanted credit, so to speak, for the ones that were genuinely his.
That was his signature, type thing.
Yeah, exactly. A signature.
Kind of like the Zodiac Killer with the O.
Right on. Yeah.
Type thing. Yeah.
So we're going to spare you reading the manifesto, but Craig, do you have any notes about like the gist of it?
It's not really. I mean, I kind of get, just wrote down pretty much manifesto. That wasn't my point. I was actually I was more taken just by the application, like how they went down, how they put them into the street.
Will you humor me for if I keep 3 minutes to talk about the manifesto?
Yeah, go for it, because like I said, it still is interesting. But yeah,
it comes into and this is great. They're just these tiles with a handful of words, no bigger than 12 by 6 inches. And what hooks people in, or if people get hooked in, There's such a wide spectrum. And to me, that's the great thing if you just take it as art, right? So the manifesto thing is very interesting. This manifesto tile was found on Chestnut Street. If you're familiar with Philly, when I was in college, I spent a ton of time on Chestnut Street, along with Walnut and a few other streets. It's one of the main drags in Philly. It's since been paved over, so you can't go see it, but thankfully we have a photographic record of it. So in this manifesto, he talks about a newspaper magnate. Everybody talks about Rupert Murdoch now, right? But back in the day, there was John S. Knight of Knight Ridder. And this claims that this guy sent the mafia to the Tyler's house in 1991 to try to murder him, that the U.S. government, the USSR, the FBI, and Interpol, right, the international police, are all complicit with the media. And he names names: NBC, CBS, Westinghouse, Universal, Time Warner, and Fox. This is what he calls the cult of the Hellion. Now, Craig, before going too far sideways, Hunter S. Thompson killed himself because of the death of the Fourth Estate. We know that the Fourth Estate is bought and sold. We know that the 24-hour news cycle going back to the first Gulf War and CNN, who was the grandbaby of all of that with Ted Turner in Atlanta, had sort of corrupted and turned media into pure entertainment. Now we have the talking heads. We have Fox on one side. We have MSNBC on the other. You know, all this different kind of stuff. CNN somehow floats sort of between them, that none of them are to be trusted. So this is in the 90s. This is 30 years ago. This guy is talking about the corruption of American media. So to me, it's a very salient point. It's not just some paranoid guy. He seems to have some insights. And it makes me think of Dan Rather when the guy assaulted him. I think that was in the 1990s, and he was yelling at him while he was assaulting him. What's a frequency, Kenneth? What's a frequency, Kenneth? What's a frequency, Kenneth?
Yep.
And it's sort of this trope of people who maybe have a schizophrenia or something like that, who feel like messages are being beamed into their heads.
I never found it in my research, and I was just thought about it here too. Did you get any feeling like maybe he used to work for one, either the Philadelphia Inquirer, or he was in something else and he was let go? Because this could have been, like, when you look at the documentary, they go based off of the names. I'm not going to jump ahead yet.
Yeah.
But in that research, I don't think I ever remember them digging in to see if there was anybody let go or fired from newspapers, radio, something that would have had a tie to some of these groups. Because it speaks to me of somebody who is very bitter, somebody that has something, the proverbial axe to grind. I mean, because it sounds like, pardon my language, those bastards are going to get it.
Yeah.
Type of, and so I wondered that from watching the documentary and from just when you were talking, could that ever come across your mind, like maybe this guy was an ex-employee in the journalist, world?
That, that's why I like working with you. I really do. A little spontaneous love there. It makes me think of the Unabomber, right? Manifestos are usually people who have been seriously wronged or perceived wrong, and they get into it. And it could be because, look, he's a writer. The newsletters are fairly eloquent. What little I've seen of the newsletters, and we'll get into that from their association, the Minority Association. Just by calling it the Minority Association, here's a persecution complex too.
Yeah.
So I think that could be a new strand. That could be a new strand of research, I think, for this. Well done, my friend. But that's all I wanted to say about that, except one of the suspects, someone broke into his house and held a knife to his throat.
Yeah.
Maybe for a completely different reason. So I don't know where you want to go next.
Well, I think pretty much we just go So we covered the very the very basics, like what was going on here. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
before we really get into like a lot of the things, is like what I focused on was how they came about their thinking of how it was done.
Okay.
And that's the one, like you got the image right there, because the guy for the documentary, he actually came across this, and this one, I don't know if this one was an original one, from the original guy or from somebody else. I don't think it had I think it has the looks of, if I'm not mistaken, I think it has the original, like this could be the original Toynbee tile layer. But it shows, as you can see from this image, this isn't just stuck on the asphalt. This is actually buried. It's buried into the asphalt itself. And then it's covered with like that tar paper. So eventually that tar paper is going to wear away and it's going to reveal the tile. Well, through his search for the thing, they discovered, and I'm trying to get the details. I wrote them down here and I'm trying to find them, but about the car that they found.
Yep.
And that one, one of the guys that they came across is, I guess we can get into this one a little bit. They came across a guy who went by the name of James Marasco, and that's and so as they will circle back, get more into him. But what they found is that they believe that there was this other guy named Severino Verna who used that as an alias. So as they did this investigation, they ended up coming to Verna's place, and around his residence was a lot of these what they refer to as proto tiles. In like test tiles, that they were putting all these tests everywhere. And then we'll come back to the ham radio, shortwave radio, theories that he was involved in. But some of his neighbors commented that he used to drive around in a car without a passenger seat.
Yeah.
And so what they're thinking is I can't remember the documentary if they were ever able to get a look at the car or not.
They never saw the car,
yeah.
But they said the floorboards were missing too.
Yeah. And so that's what they're thinking, because some of these tile placements are in the middle of the freeway.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not something like in a back alley where somebody would have all day. I mean, this would be at a stoplight. Yeah. And then you wake up the next morning and bam, there's a Toynbee tile sitting there in the crosswalk. So that, somebody's going to notice a guy out there chiseling, knocking asphalt out, trying to set this tile. So they think, however he's doing it, and it looks like that image right there, it almost looks like he uses a torch to kind of to soften the asphalt. And then with the hole missing in the floorboard, then all you'd have to do is have some like tamper device, your foot or something else, to just kind of pat it down, stick the stuff on there and drive away. And somebody would just think you're a drunk, or some guy trying to pick up a prostitute and and something, and nobody's going to think. They're going to think, oh God, it's just a normal day occurrence in some of the streets. But yet here's this guy placing a tile and nobody, drives away. I mean, it's a really cool thing that you would see out of a movie. I mean, it's really fascinating how they get done.
It is. There was, from 1999 to 2006, a guy named Bill O'Neill ran a website called Toynbee.net, which he turned over to the researchers in 2006. It had all kinds of emails. It was sort of just a record of theories. The theories get into aliens and everything, as you can imagine, with anything like this. If you had a website and said, just let us know what you think. But there was a tile in Pittsburgh near the Hilton that had deployment instructions, as they call it. Linoleum asphalt glue in several layers. And then what is asphalt glue? Then place the tar paper over it so that the car wheels won't mess it up. And apparently the heat of the sun on the tar paper will bake it into the street.
Yep.
That
get hot
tile,
and just kind of smashes it down.
Yeah.
And and so it's really, so you can see right there, it's just done, and it is pretty ingenious, because then that paper will just wear off, roll away, and then boom, it's like a grandiose reveal out of nowhere, and it's it could be several days before that thing ever shows up.
And as you can see, over time, they deteriorate. This is the original one. There's only sections there, but some of it is down. And in Philadelphia, Lori said, so temporary with the paving over. Now, scheduled road maintenance and all, how do you, even if you wanted to save them, it would be very difficult. But in my research, Craig, I found a tale of two cities, let's call it. Philadelphia has said, this is art, and we want to preserve this. Chicago, that problematic and interesting city, Rahm Emanuel's little domain, and before that it was, what's his name in the 60s, that horrific guy there whose name is escaping me, said Mayor Daley, Richard Daley. And but anyway, Chicago says this is graffiti and we'll treat it like graffiti. And if any pop up, they immediately get rid of them.
They take them out. And so a lot of these ones are lost other than the photographs that have been taken of them.
Yeah.
And stuff. But yeah, it's just it's crazy how, like you said, Tale of Two Cities, where one city is like, we've got to try to preserve these, and then you have the other, all these other ones that are just like, we got to remove them. It's just and there's one that's supposedly in Portland. I don't ever remember hearing of, but then, I lived there. Portland, I don't remember. Yeah. I don't remember ever hearing about one when I was up there.
And those are probably the ones that are a little further away. We should talk about the suspects, I think.
Yeah.
Because there's really only two. And so they're mostly kind of like East Coast and they go kind of far west as Missouri. The South American ones are anomaly, and it's actually one in Chile that had an address to a street house that led to the possible Tyler. So these guys basically, let's just mention, before we talk about the two suspects, this name James Morosco. Two people named James Morosco were tracked down in the Philadelphia area by reporters, and neither one of them checked out.
Yeah. Nope. That was basically, that's when they pretty much isolated out that they're sure it was just simply an alias. Like, somebody just picked it out of the phone book.
Probably so. This is very interesting. One of them was a carpenter. One of them was a social worker from two different, both of their wives were interviewed and said, have no idea what you're talking about. No interest in Jupiter, definitely was no kind of craftsman doing tiles in the middle of the night. One of them died, I think, at 87, and the other one died at 88.
Yeah, the only one
is really interesting, isn't it? They died around the same time.
You can see why they would also look to the social work one, not so much. I mean, I guess in some aspects, but the construction, the carpenter, linoleum.
Yeah.
They're gonna know how to work the material. They're gonna know how, so there's most likely they've done some sort of building. So, you could see why they would still question these people. But yeah, it didn't really look like they really had much in the way other than just, the name was used.
Yeah, probably just a random name, maybe out of the phone book or something. Maybe this guy, the Tyler went to see the social worker at some point. Right? Doesn't seem like he had a regular job or anything like that. Again, we're speculating, just like what you were saying about, did he work for journalists or something, in journalism? All speculation, but interesting, and not in the documentary. So this is something new that you and I are bringing to the discussion here. But I thought it was really interesting. 188, 187, both died in 2003. That's just so weird. And the fact that they would have been in their 70s probably eliminates them from doing this kind of work. And they didn't disappear for long periods of time or anything like that. So I'm going to, before I turn it over to you to kind of talk about Sevi, there was this interesting dude, because there is the street address. Some documentaries block it out. Not going to give the street address. I'll just say it's on South 7th. In Philadelphia. You can watch in the documentary, they tell it. but a guy lived there prior to Severino named Railroad Joe, a dude named Julius Paroli. So this is exciting as researchers, as I was following this. So the researchers look and they go, he worked for the railroad. He worked for Conrail. He could have traveled. So they look at the railroad maps and they match up to all the cities. And then there was some kind of weird delivery that even went down to Chile. That was through Conrail.
Mm-hmm.
So they really thought they had it. And I was going, oh, this has to be the dude. This is too awesome. And he lived in the house. But he died in 1987. And the original prototypes continued. Now, what they don't talk about is Severino takes over the house. Maybe Railroad Joe trained him and gave him the templates and all to carry it forward. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, it could have been. I mean, it's like it could have been master and apprentice, type thing. I mean, it could have been, he may have been the original. And then the person that was studying from him, took over and would have kept the same. So, and that could have been why all of a sudden they started to see a lot more variation in the tiles as well.
Yeah. But tell us about Severino Sevi the Birdman Verna.
It was for him, like I said, this is one of those ones. I was funny. It's like I just focused on the more of the whys than the actual individuals too. Yeah. But he is a guy that he just literally, I mean, it almost had a Nikola Tesla feel to it, where he suddenly became a recluse. Like he was just afraid to go outside. He was afraid, he feels that everybody is out to get him. Everybody's trying to, he's trying to be killed. I guess one of the best ways to describe it would be Mel Gibson's movie, Conspiracy Theorist.
Yeah.
Is kind of, that's what, when he was knocking on the door, that's what I pictured inside. It was that same type of thing, to where it just, there's going to be stacks of papers everywhere. He's going to be double, triple, locks. But go ahead and get yourself, like I said, because that's one of the things, unfortunately, like I said, I didn't focus on him per se. I looked at how they did it, why they did it, and just those details.
Right on. So Sevi is interesting. He was committed to this idea. So he started this group called the Minority Association, and he had newsletters and he had a P.O. box. There were these rumors of these shortwave messages. Ham radio operators would hear these ideas like the same way that he would call the news station. Now, he also did something very cool, kooky, which may have led to an alternative explanation as to why someone tried to threaten him and maybe cut his throat. But probably they just wanted to scare him. He would put a Texas antenna, it's a big giant whip antenna. He would put it on his car and he would drive down the street in the neighborhoods in Philly and he would broadcast his message. Now, it sounds crazy, but there was this guy and his name was, I'm trying to buy myself a little time here. His last name, I think, was Raymond, right? Raymond? Joe Raimondo.
Yeah.
Joe Raimondo.
Yeah, Raimondo.
1985. He's watching the 11 o'clock news, which we all did in Jersey, Philly, New York. Everybody watched Eyewitness News. A voice comes on talking about Toynbee and 2001. So Raimondo calls the station, goes, listen, do you know that during the news broadcast, I heard this thing? And they go, well, you weren't the only one who heard it. So I think that might have been a reason. He would drive down the street, interrupt people's evenings, beam this thing into their TVs through their old rabbit ear antennas, right? So they start to dig through the ham radio operators, and they find a guy who had actually heard one of these broadcasts, heard about a P.O. box, and wrote to the Minority Association and said, send me your paperwork. He got it in one document, one time, is the name Severino Verna. All throughout most of the documents in the newsletters, it's James Marasco. But one time, for whatever reason, Sevi slips up. His name's Severino Verna. There's also a really cool shot where the researchers went to a ham radio operator conference in Philly, and they talked to a guy. And the guy says, I was contacted about using my P.O. box for the Minority Association. And they say, can you remember who made the ask? This was a cool moment. It could have been all staged and fabricated. I tend to trust the documentary, and I tend to trust Justin Dewar, because he was bullied all his life, and I don't think he's going to come and perpetrate a hoax. The guy goes, look, it was a long time ago, but if you throw some names at me, maybe it'll ring a bell. So they go, Severino. He goes, Severino Verna? That was the guy. Yeah. I mean, like, that's the drop of the mic right there.
Yep. It just as soon as when you first said Severino, Verna, you're pretty much you're just like, well, hey, that's the way to all right. It's like playing Clue. Check.
Yeah. So it seems like it. Now everybody kind of falls short. Justin Dewar goes, man, I was getting so hooked into this for like a decade. They would go to the house, they would knock, they brought over all these neighbors, watch, because it's a very entertaining, it reminds me of some of the neighborhoods in Jersey where I grew up. There's all kinds of interesting people in the neighborhood. Very Italian, very ethnic, right up my alley. Nobody can get Sevi to come out. He's got the door bolted. At one point he had plywood on the windows. But Justin Dewar is going past the neighborhood, and sure enough, on the bus, he thinks Sevi gets on. And he did want to talk to him. And the guy looked kind of like deep in his mind. He made eye contact with Justin Dewar. I believe this was around the time of the documentary, or maybe, no, he had seen Justin knocking on his door. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Countless times outside the window. Probably neighbors said to Sevi, oh, this dude is asking about you. He chose not to talk to him. Then he found that new tile with the tar paper, and he almost felt like he just missed Sevi.
Yeah, because he was like hiding in the bush. He was like hiding over behind the bushes and stuff, waiting to see if they return.
Yeah. So very, very interesting. So let's get into, because we only have about 8 or 10 minutes left. Let's get into some of the copycats, Craig. So Toynbee idea movie 2001, Resurrect Dead, Plan Jupiter. Different color scheme, different font, except it does have the little eye in Jupiter in movie.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, like, they still kept some of the originals.
Yep.
The original style. And that's, and there's some that are really, really interesting. I mean, it's just, there's several different types, like we'll get into the House of Hades.
Well, I think it's time. Here we go. I'm going to leave that to you. Hold on. There we go.
So the House of Hades, there's stuff known, but there's still really an obscure thing that nobody really knows a lot about. I mean, even in the documentary, they really didn't get much into who is behind the House of Hades that I remember, unless I missed that part.
There was only one thing. So these House of Hades start showing up. And as you can see, they're still riffing on the media thing. House of Hades tiles made from the ground bones of dead journalists. This one's interesting with the car going to the factory, with the smoke rising up, and
then Joey provided the censored version. He didn't realize this either.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
But if everybody looks at the image up on the top of where it says House of Hades, that is a woman's leg. And what's missing is on the side, that would have been another woman's leg, and right here in the corner would have been her butt. And so it was a naked woman spread-legged on, and a lot of their tiles have this naked woman with her legs spread. And that's like their calling card for this House of Hades.
Which is very interesting, because what is it alluding to? We don't know.
That's the thing. Because they don't give any details, like why why is this, I think that's one of the mysteries too. It's like, maybe there's something, like we said before, maybe this is something you got a puzzle you got to figure out.
Yeah.
To find,
Yeah. And because it's media, and here's one, and Craig, I just realized this, but I'm glad it's up here. House of Hades, the resurrection of Toynbee's idea in Society 2012. So it's a callback. Also interesting, they put the little hash mark in front of the two, right? So you see that there? The hash mark between 2012, just like in the original.
Yep.
The hash mark, and then in their other one that isn't necessarily a callback, it's still, the hash mark is still there. House of Hades, one man versus American media. Some people think that might be Trump. Maybe it is a callback to the original Tyler. But they seem to think because it's 2017 and Trump drained the swamp and all of that, not realizing that he's part of the media and was part of the whole reality TV.
It says, because even on the top, and if you it's hard to read some, but I believe it does say not a Republican fake news faction.
Right, exactly. So
I'm not sure what the bottom says. It's like,
I
think it's something, not a political party. It's just something. Yeah, it's
so, and again, ground bones of dead journalists.
Yeah, this House 80s really seems to have upped the tax on journalism.
Yeah.
From the original Tyler. Like, this is, like it's gotten a little bit more provocative. Like, they're actually just saying, journalists must die type thing,
Yeah, which is interesting. And obviously it isn't, it's linoleum like all the others. I will say this, Craig, you and I each on our shows, Three Beards Podcast, folks, every Wednesday night, they have a new sponsor, Radio. Radio, you can hear our show and Craig's show on Wednesday nights at 10 o'clock. And then, Craig, you're the chaser, right? At 11 or 11:30?
Yes. We get the privilege of following you.
Yeah, so it's a nice team. And so a shout out to Ronald, who's joining us tonight, and your sponsor. Congratulations. That's awesome. We both had someone on, Samuel Chung, a couple weeks ago, you last month, talking about the Thebua prophecies. It's very, very popular interview on my end. Lots of people are watching it through YouTube. There are 4 things that the higher intelligences say we got to be careful of. Money, of course, politics, drugs, and the other one is journalism. And it's very interesting to me. Yeah,
they seem, because it's funny you said it, because I was in my head too, about where it seems to be a common theme where, in a way, it's a lot of stuff is like, it seems to be like a common thing with like manifesto, the free news is considered a threat.
Yeah.
And so does that mean the Theoban prophet, thing views free flow of information as a threat? Or, because they have like this, it's the same thing. Like it's like they've got this idea that journalism inherently, anybody that writes news is inherently bad. And it's like, I mean, are there going to be bad people? Yes. I mean, we all know this, but it's one of those, the free flow of ideas is paramount. I mean, that's what makes our system so much better than, around the globe, is we actually can do a show like this and not be immediately rounded up and hauled out there for saying the ideas. I mean, we might get Facebook jail time,
right?
But hey, at least we can
nobody's asking us or anyone like us to be on Good Morning America. That's my take of it. It's the mass media, which is corporate. They're distorting the UFO. They're distorting the UFO story, where genuine footage of UFOs never makes it. But then you have Jeremy Corbell's thing, where he uses a special effects lens on a regular airplane to make it look like a triangular, and it goes like ballistic across mass media, right? Yeah. So I think certain people have to pass the litmus test. Then, of course, is the whole thing that fake news spreads 7 times faster than genuine news on social media. So I think that's what it is. I mean, I go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think you make up a really good point there, because it's, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's got to be flashy, because, something like, if we just said, we're talking right here, we're saying what we know. We don't know who the House of Hades is. But if I just said, if we put the headline on this show that says proof that House of Hades is a Trump organization, boom, you're going to have clicks galore. You're going to have people checking this out, boom, 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 boom. And then they're going to find out, and that's what it is. That's what people do. It's about the clicks. I mean, you could see in that aspect where journalism, that type of journalism is a threat, because it can be destructive in the fact that it can create narratives that don't exist.
Right. And we're very careful. And, on your show, Three Beards, you guys were naming names last night on your episode about the Antichrist, which everybody should check out. You could go see that on YouTube. You could go see it on Facebook. Naming names. Mr. Tesla, Mr. Twitter, Mr. SpaceX was one of your guests, leading candidates.
Yeah, Macron.
What other names came up? Yeah.
Macron, Pope Francis.
Yeah, it was
Zelensky, me. I even said it could be me, in the intro.
You don't know. Could be old Joey with his Templar stuff, and also it's going to be interesting because you actually said House of Hades, a Trump organization.
Yeah.
So we'll see if the algorithms are our friend. That's an interesting experiment,
isn't
it?
And that would be my defense. So I'll say apologize now if that happens. But that's one of those things is where it just the danger of the TMZ type news organizations where it's basically you've got to come up with some sensationalist clickbait title. If you really want your thing to take off, it has to be something that people want to just jump on. They've got to get to. I mean,
and that's not my guest last week, Patricia Corey. I'm so glad to see it. It's getting a lot of views on Facebook, a lot, and they're not messing with it because it's not enough that Facebook gives a crap about me. So. Look here, Tanya says Don Henley had it right in the 80s. That great song, Dirty Laundry. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
That's good stuff. So that's absolutely right. Well, sir, that's all I got.
Yeah, no, that was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to the next ones too, because next time, hopefully I won't be suffering from a head cold, so I'll be a little bit more coherent.
Yeah, and I think you'll be a little tanner.
Yeah.
I don't want to, in this day and age, I don't want to tell people what anybody's up to, but you're taking a well-deserved break in the middle of this month.
Take a little vacation. We'll come back. I mean, we'll be in the area. I mean, it's like we're not going too far from the sun.
Right on.
Down here in the floor, the area. So no, we'll be doing it. It'll be great to get spend time with the family. But yeah, Tanya, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. It's one of those. I don't know the way to describe it. It's kind of like things are like ricocheting inside there. They're like, So my ADD is like I'm a cracked out squirrel right now. So
you're doing a great job.
Yeah. So I just like, God.
Yeah, no, that was I'm finally coming out of that long COVID thing. I'm finally getting my coherence back. The stutter's going away. So I was really worried that was going to be permanent. We're dealing with some kind of stomach thing that just absolutely won't go away. And Tanya and I both have it. It's pushing 2 weeks now, week and a half. It's just frustrating. So, but anyway, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, just hope you guys, healing. I said thoughts, prayers for you guys too.
Yeah. You too. So, and Miss Lori is under the weather. Lori is a contributor to the show, so please feel better. And anybody else who's, Michael Giannetti, who hasn't been able to Thursday nights, he's got a new responsibility that he really has to deal with, and I miss him dearly. But what did he say today? I don't have my phone with me. He said it's weather like spring, but it's really like Halloween, but it's the middle of winter, and it's very frustrating. So
weird.
Yeah, you don't know whether to put on the jacket, go outside, stay inside. It's very dark and dreary here. So anyway, we appreciate you all very much, and I'll see you next week. Something a little different. A writer named Thomas Lane. He's a screenwriter. He's a novelist, and he's got a book called The Karma Factor, and it's a police thriller meets Tibetan reincarnation spiritualism.
Wow.
So we're going to talk about that next week. So
Nice.
what do you have coming up next Wednesday?
I'm going to spin the wheel of shows and see which one I feel is like a really good one. Like I said, we'll rebroadcast one because with me being on vacation, the guys weren't incredibly comfortable running it by themselves, so they decided that that they would just leave it in the hand, wheel of fate. We'll just spin it and we'll see. But
Nice.
So I don't know. It could be a show based with somebody that's right above me. We don't know. We'll see.
Goodness.
We'll see. So that'll be
all right. Take care.
We're gonna be good. We'll see you next month.
Peace.